Okay, so you see, if the endpoint end only on the circumference or on the boundary, okay, we call them diameter, we call them chord. But if suppose I draw one line, now it is not inside the circle, it is outside the circle, but you clearly see it touch the circle only at one point, okay, it touch the circle only at one point. Then the endpoint also, they are outside the circle. That line, what we call it? We call it as tangent of a circle. Then if you have another line, we draw it, we extend it outside the circle. It cut the circle at 2 points. What we call that line? We call it secant. Okay. So if inside the circle we have half radius, we join endpoint pass through the center, we call diameter. If we join any two part, we call chord. All these are inside the circle. But if we extend it to the exterior part, if it touches the circle at one point, we call it tangent. If it cut the circle at 2 points, then we call it as secant. Okay. Then now, this distance. Suppose you may take the thread, you measure this one. Okay. Measure the boundary. So, the measure of the boundary, what we call it? We call it circumference. Okay. If we have like a circle, or sorry, like a triangle, straight line. If we measure all three sides, we call it perimeter. But in a circle, if we measure, okay, that means how long it is. That is what we call circumference of the circle. Be careful, okay. Now with the spelling. The length of the boundary of a circle, that is what we call circumference. If it is made of curved line, we call circumference. But in a quadrilateral triangle, they are made of straight line, we call it perimeter. So if you say perimeter of circle, also correct. If you say circumference, also correct. Remember, it is the length of the boundary. We used to do fencing, no? Ngikir keper ma. Tekato jaka bakir pelon. That is what we call circumference. But we have to measure how much is the length. So only the length, that will be called our circumference. Then if you take this circle, you join the diameter. Then what happened now? The circle is broken into two equal half, like protector, no? Half this side, half this side. Half of circle, what we call it? Semi. We used to say, no? Semi-final. That means more half. Clear? So if the circle is break into two part with diameter, each part is known as semicircle. Then if you have this boundary, you break it into smaller part. Okay? Small like that. That is what we call arcs of a circle. What we call ARC of a circle. If you have very small, we call minor. Minor means small. Okay. Then if you take the larger one, we call major. Remember. Okay. Minor, small, bigger, major. Then suppose now in a circle you join two radius. You see, no? Like suppose there is a cake, you cut this one, piece of cake or piece of pizza. So this one, what we call it, this portion, we call it as sector. So remember, if we join the radius, we call it sector. This smaller part, we call minor. This major part, we call sector. Clear? You can make it if you want, okay? Using your scrapbook, you draw a circle, then you can cut a piece of cake, cut small one, big one. Small is minor, large one is major. Then another one, if suppose you have circle, you take the chord and then you cut. You see, this portion, we join the chord, okay? So this portion now, we call it as what? Segment. If you cut like a piece of cake, we call sector. But if you cut it this way, we call it segment, okay? The small one we call minor segment. The big one we call major segment. But if you cut it into half, then we call it as semicircle, okay? Then you may see like this one. We have one circle outside, one circle inside. But they all start from the same center, okay? You may see so many other examples also like ball bearing. We have like that, okay? Same center, but many circles are drawn, okay? So such kind of circle, drawing from the same center, but different radii. Here you see small, this one bigger, this one bigger. Such kind of figure we call them concentric figure. For the time being, we read all the definition, but when the comment tell us exam will start, then I will divide the portion, okay? Because all this term you need to know for your higher classes. Don't study only to pass exam, but study also for your own knowledge, okay? So you can check in the book chapter 11. Your book and my book page are different, I think, because my one is old. So here we will see now. Clear? What is a circle? A circle, it is a collection of all points. Remember this one, which are on the boundary, and they are, the distance is constant. Constant means same from a fixed point. So that fixed point is what we call as the center. Okay. Then center, that this the point on the middle. Then you see radius of circle. So the distance between the center to any point on the boundary, that we call radius. We used to write it with small r. Then here you see a line segment with both endpoints on the boundary, and it passed through the center. That is what we call diameter. Okay. Then see, remember this diameter, it is equal to 2 into radius. Then from the center to the boundary, all the points are equal. Then the length of boundary, that is what we call circumference. Then a line segment inside the circle whose endpoint lie on the circle, that is what we call as chord of a circle. Okay, for second and segment I will give you. Then see arc circle, you cut the small portion, no? That is what we now call arcs. We have major, this big one, minor, the small one. Then if you see this one, if we join the chord, the circle is divided two parts. Small one we call it minor, big one we call it as major. Then here also, if you join the radius, we get what we call sector. Small one, minor, big one, major. Okay. Then if we cut the circle into two halves, we call it semicircle. Inside part we call interior. Outside part we call exterior. Then if it is on the boundary, we call it the boundary. Okay. So those. Then see here, if many circles are drawn from the same center, but different radii, that is what we call concentric circle. So as long as I don't finish to give you notes, you can find out this fill in the blank by yourself. Okay, then afterwards we will correct it together.